Hello there, welcome everybody. It is RD once again bringing you unwatchable content in another video no one will watch. But if you are a no one who is willing to watch No One Watches RD, a plucky Nowardian as I am now calling the former regular offenders as part of the rebadging and rebranding of my channel that was once known as Reality Decoded. But you join us this evening for the third installment of 5 Nights at Fema, and we are going to be starting out once again at Google. And I do know that already this has been quite an extensive, intense series of videos, with the first 2 installments already running at close to 8.5 hours, I believe. So I will try to reduce the time frame of part 3 for you, so there is a little bit less to digest and a little bit more to spread out in the further 2 installments that will follow this third installment of 5 Nights at Fema. Hopefully we will be able to conclude that within the next 2 or 3 days, but forgive me if I don't. These videos do take a little bit of time and effort to produce. Lots of research, lots of editing, lots of reading, as well as lots of recording me reading once I've decided what I am going to read in these streams. In a little bit I do have tabs open, I do have stuff that I want to bring to you in this series of Fema related streams here at No One Watches RD, and there's a little bit of where to start. So we are starting out at Google. I think I did start out trying to say that before going off somewhat on a tangent. And we are looking at the Keystone 6 Department of Homeland Security / Department of Human Services emergency care exercise. And the mass care exercise is part of Fema. We are going to look a little bit more into mass care in this stream, episode 3, part 3 rather, of 5 Nights at Fema, the Fema files. But it says there that the 2024 National Mass Care Exercise called Keystone 6 will be held in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania on May the 20th through to the 23rd. Just a couple of weeks away, or just under 3 weeks away. And pre-exercise activities, including logistics movements and training opportunities, will occur the weekend of May the 18th through to the 19th. So pre-exercise exercises start on the 18th, but the main event will kickstart into action on May the 20th of this month. Now, we have already looked at that mass care and emergency assistant from the DHS of Pennsylvania, and that isn't the Department of Homeland Security, that is the Department of Human Services, which we are going to look a little bit more there. And here we have national mass care exercises. There is the Keystone 6 symbol insignia there on the left hand side. Let me blow it up for you there. Oh my goodness, that's a new looking one. Let's click on that. As I said, it is a little bit of fuck it, let's do it live, as much as I do have some planned content to bring it there. Official site: military and first responders received 15% off FEMA study, Home IS 235C emergency planning. Okay, it's a book, you get some discount there. But there is the Keystone 6 insignia 2024, the national level exercise, the mass care exercise, Keystone 6. This is taking place in a few weeks' time, folks, which is why it is of importance to me to bring you as much information regarding this prior to the events as possible, and I don't suggest for a minute that there is going to be some disastrous, traumatic catastrophe taking place during this exercise. It is just merely an alternative avenue of exploration that we are taking into consideration here at Shit Video Productions for entertainment purposes mostly. You could consider this informative and educational if you were in that particular mindset, but make of it what you will, folks. And here again is another article there. Let's click on this, see if it is a PDF or an article. Although I have already clicked on it, I don't know if or not, because this is where it gets sort of strange and sort of gone off on a little bit of a side rabbit hole. That when I sort of was looking into FEMA mass care, we come across the National Mass Care Strategy. I come across the Keystone 6 exercise, as well as a whole host of things. And what have we got going on here? Yeah, we have seen this. So this was a document we have already seen. So let's click out of that. I think this was the one I did want to look at. FEMA Incident Management and Support Keystone. Let me click on there. Yes, we will download it again. Let's look at it with my PDF viewer. Excuse me, guys. As I said, screen recording and sort of live, somewhat investigation. But a lot of this stuff that sort of I have got piled has got a little bit congested amongst itself, and it is a little bit of sort of raveling through the tabs and trying to bring you content as I sort of bring it to you, and sort of the planning and sort of layout that I had designed is sort of somewhat departed after the first installment, but it doesn't want to open. That is very, very, very bizarre. We might have to come back to that. DH8S Surge Capacity Form Program Intern Guide. Pennsylvania statewide emergency plan for 2024, and there you can see Keystone Stars, a key component of the DHS, is coordinated agency for ESF/6. Keystone 6, is that some sort of code or reference for that there? Mass care emergency. Let's click on that. Let's see if this is a PDF or it is a government website, guys, so there is a chances that it will be a PDF. If not, it will open at all. It is a PDF. Do I want to download it again? Yes, I do. Let's try it with the other PDF viewer, see if it opens. All right. So here it is. It is a PDF, folks. This is from the Department of Human Services, I believe. And let me try and bring it up there. Yes, you can see in the top left-hand side of the screen there, Department of Human Services, and there you can see Pennsylvania Office of Child Development and Early Learning, Pennsylvania Statewide Child Care Emergency Plan for 2024, and this is part of the Keystone event, guys. So is there going to be something going on with the children? And geez, even with my eyes and my optical assistance, my eyes are struggling to read that. And I don't believe it gives us the option to view it in mobile version of this PDF. They are a little bit difficult to navigate on the phone, but the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania State Emergency Operation Plan, SEOP, is designed to assist state-level leaders and emergency management personnel in handling all phases of emergency management during any type of disaster. It follows the principles of the National Incident Management System, NIMS, and the Incident Command System, the ICS, as specified by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Yada yada woo woo December 20th, 2004. All hazard and materials, all hazard emergency management acknowledgements that most disasters and emergencies are best managed as a cycle consisting of 4 phases: prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery, with mitigation across all 4 phases. All hazard emergency management also acknowledges that there are common emergency functional responses to address. These commonalities are the SEOP, and this contains 15 functional annexes. as well is each of them addressing the emergency support function. The ESF is a mechanism that consolidates multiple agencies that perform similar or like functions into a single cohesive unit to allow for the better management of emergency response functions. The Department of Human Services, the other DHS, has been tasked as the coordinating agency for Emergency Support Function 6, ESF. Hashtag 6, Emergency Support Function 6. What on earth could that be, folks? But it's going to tell us. Emergency Support Function 6, ESF, hashtag 6, is the Mass Care, Shelter and Human Services. And this coordinates the delivery of Commonwealth mass care, emergency assistance, housing, and human services when a county response and recovery needs exceed their capabilities. The DHS, the other DHS, the Department of Human Services Response and Recovery Framework for Mass Care, Shelter and Human Services, identify the authority, roles and responsibilities for DHS executives and the program offices to ensure the collective response to disasters and emergencies. So sort of the DHS looks a little bit like sort of an emergency management force that sort of consolidates all sort of existing agencies or sort of agencies that operate similarly into one, as we just read, cohesive unit. But scope: in September of 2014, the Federal Childcare Development Fund and a block grant was to support childcare, and through the Administration for Children and Families, the Office of Childcare to the DHS Office of Child Development and Early Learning, OCDEL, DEL there in brackets, OCDEL. These funds, along with the required matching state funds, support childcare licensing, childcare subsidy and the Commonwealth's quality rating and improvement system. The Keystone Stars, we looked at that in part 2 of the Fema files. A key component of the CCDBG Act of 2014, the reauthorization was the inclusion in the requirements for participating states to develop and disseminate I can't read that word, I'm struggling. Disseminate a statewide childcare emergency plan. In section 658E, some codes and more numbers there. The statewide childcare emergency plan must include guidelines for continuing childcare development, and that is the CCDF Development Fund. Assistance and childcare services after a disaster, which may include provision of temporary childcare and temporary operating standards for childcare after a disaster. Requirements that childcare providers receiving CCDF have in place the procedures for evacuation, relocation, shelter in place, lockdown, communication, and down to the next page, reunification with families, continuity of operations, accommodation of infants and toddlers, children with disabilities, and children with chronic medical conditions. Requirements that childcare providers receiving CCDF have in place procedures for staff and volunteer emergency preparedness training and practice drills. In order to fulfill the requirement of section 658, OCDEL has developed the following statewide childcare emergency plan with the intent to identify and communicate the process and supports for childcare in the event of an individual, local, regional, or statewide emergency or disaster, should one of those eventualities occur. It does outline recommendations for planning, preparedness, response and recovery from a disaster, and the role the office will play providing support. So the document provides guidance regarding childcare centres, CCCs, groups and family child care homes certified by OCDEL, and this also strives to provide information relevant to all other early learning programs in terms of recommendations and resources. I don't understand the early learning programs. I can sort of understand the sort of idea of having sort of places and centres for children that may have lost families and loved ones and relatives during natural disasters, and they need a place to go and need to be cared for and such forth. But what is really going on behind this is what we're getting at, what the dual purpose could be, or could there be more than one person? So let's just scroll down to the overview a little bit. I don't want to read too much of this, guys, because there are 17 pages to this document, and 17 pages of navigating the way we are is going to be a little bit nauseating for everybody. I think it's given me a little bit of sickness there. But the overview 1.4 is that the Office of Child Development and Early Learning is a dual deputate, isn't it? Deputate of both the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the Department of Human Services. So Human Services and the Department of Education sort of acting as one under this OCDEL, which is the Office of Child Development and Early Learning. Again, this might be something that we have to look into, and this is sort of a little bit of the way it is when we investigate Fema, that sort of documents open up, that we open up sort of provide us sort of answers, but also open up entrances to intertwined rabbit holes, and somehow I believe all of this is connected, and everything that is sort of going on at the moment with these military maneuvers, with these Fema field force exercises, as well as a whole host of other exercises Fema have running for hurricanes, tornadoes, buildings collapsing, train derailments. Geez, guys, you name it, the list, however long it may be, I'm pretty sure Fema at some point or other in the last few weeks or few months, or probably the last year, have been conducting drills for almost every eventuality you could possibly imagine. But where were we in this? But as an office, many of the Commonwealth's child serving systems, SS, are funded or supported by the OCDEL staff or business partners. OCDEL serves as Pennsylvania's lead agency for the administration of childcare and development fund block grant, and additionally OCDEL receives funding through the offices of Head Start for the Head Start State Collaboration Office. Again, something we might have to look in, the Head Start of the Head Start. The Office of Head Start for the Head Start of State Collaboration Office. Goodness, what could the acronym for that be, folks? Let me know in the comments if you're paying attention. And I'm very aware some of you might not be paying attention, but if you are, the article, and we're going to finish up this by saying from the United States Department of Education is to support services to children eligible for early intervention from birth to 3. So why are they innovating? This is where it gets interesting, guys. Listen to that. Children who are eligible for early intervention from birth to 3 and 3 to school age. Very, very interesting. I mean, I guess that, recently birthed children might be orphaned in disaster situations that might warrant eligibility for this. But what is really, really going on in this? Some of this wording, especially that eligible for early intervention. Now, as I said, guys, there is an awful lot to get through in this. And I mean, look, how small the words are if we do scroll down. But what I will do is scroll down to the very bottom each and every one of these pages. So if you do want to, you can come back and watch this again. You can stop, start, pause, read away as you like. And you know, if we were to read every single word in this article alone, this you know, that would run for probably an hour or two in itself without any additional articles that I do want to get through. So although these are sort of long streams, some of the information is a little bit intense. It isn't exactly a deep dig into some of these agendas and you know, programs and strategies that Fema is conducting and carrying out, and as its fingers in. So we did get down to the bottom. I will scroll back up to the top for you just for a second reference. But what was I saying there? I forget now. I got distracted. But yeah, it isn't exactly a deep dive into all of these, because as I said, each and every one of these documents is a sort of stream in itself that could be 2 or 3 hours long. So we are sort of surface skimming to a degree to bring some of you guys that may be unfamiliar with who Fema are, or maybe aware of who Fema are, but sort of unaware just exactly how powerful of an entity they truly are, and just how many sort of executive orders in programs, in strategies, in operations, in exercises and drills they are conducting. Maybe you will begin to find them as interesting, fascinating and disturbing and truly scary as I truly am. And with all these sort of activities going on that Fema are conducting, not only that, the military involvements, conducting exercises, relocating military grade technology and hardware to locations around the United States under the guise of exercises and drills, with all these campus chaos, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel protests and commotions going on campuses nationwide, with police sort of ready and waiting in the sidelines, in the wings, to be called into action should the colleges choose those protesters to be dispersed and sort of cease and desist. They will come in and they will be using Fema Field Force tactics, methods straight from the Fema Field Force operating manual that we have looked at extensively here at NoOneWatchesArDee. But we are going to look at another a PDF, and it is relating to Keystone, and I'll just leave it for you to tell you. We've got another article about Keystone. Make of it if you will, if it's as disturbing or more disturbing is what this statewide childcare emergency could be, and what this early development learning program that children from birth to 3 could be eligible is, as I say, guys, something we may have to save for another day. And if enough of you Nowardians watching who are paying attention, maybe you can choose the content for the next stream and let me know which ones of these you are more interested in than others, and I will try and include those in the concluding episodes of Fema Files, 5 Nights at Fema, a shit video productions NoOneWatchesArDee special event. Radio, folks. So as I promised, more Keystone information, and here we find ourselves at khs.org. Good luck if you can find this, but you might be able to, because I was able to find it, but something I stumbled across while typing in Google, Keystone Department of Human Services, and this was something that popped up in those search results, and there you can see the logo at the top, Keystone Human Services. Keystone Human Services once again. Now, what it looks like, guys, is this is sort of targeted at children, youngsters, adolescents, I guess, with disabilities, or what might be considered defective perhaps, or maybe a cost burden to society because they need additional medical treatment or expenses in order to have a sort of somewhat normal life. And again, all of these sort of kids with sort of Down syndromes and stuff are perfectly happy and sort of get on with life without too many requirements for sort of hospital visitations and sort of surgeries and that sort of stuff, but there are a lot of children out there that do sort of require a little bit of assistance from the medical industry to sort of keep them alive. And the reason I'm sort of pointing this out is during the sort of rise of National Socialism in Germany during the 1930s, and they sort of were selecting individuals that they thought would be the sort of perfect candidates, the perfect specimens of Aryanness to live in the new National Socialist world that was the plan in plans of Adolf Hitler and his cronies. They actually sort of didn't really take kindly or fondly to sort of Germans who might be a little bit defective or disabled or not function as well as they should be. And unfortunately, some of these Germans weren't considered worthy enough to be part of the National Socialist New World that they were building, and unfortunately found themselves in similar situations to other undesirables to National Socialist agendas and plans. And by that I mean the extermination of the Jews at the death camps, which was also the location that some of these defective Germans ended up. So we just heard about care facilities, early learning development skills, some children being eligible from birth to 3 years old. What is going on with these Keystone child care facilities and the Keystone Human Services? But there you go. It says straight away, create inclusive communities and build a better world. Change lives. Keystone Human Services provides support and expertise so that everybody can be included and have a valued presence in the community. Time and again, we have seen people's lives change as they move from situations of segregation and marginalization to inclusion and self-determination. Everyone benefits when all people have opportunities to fully participate in the community and access their rights. The Keystone Human Services work revolves around supporting people to direct their own lives, to establish a home, find meaningful work, pursue education alongside their peers, develop real relationships, and fill valued roles within the community. We develop and provide community-based supports for people with disability, provide a consultation and technical assistance on inclusive policies and legal frameworks. And we advocate for disability rights and inclusive practices. Doesn't, on the surface, doesn't seem that bad of a thing at all. But again, guys, remember there may be a dual purpose, and they might just be providing a cover surface story to protect them and provide a smokescreen from what really is going on. But that building a better world, all-inclusive communities sounds a little bit one-worldy to me. What do you think, guys? Is it got a tinge of a one-worldness about this article, or has it got a shit ton of one-worldness about it? But this is their one goal, is they do all of this with the one goal in mind, a one goal for one world, to build a better world where everyone belongs. Advocacy, they take an active role against segregation and marginalization, pushing for inclusive practices in all sectors of society. SS there, folks, perhaps. Deinstitutionalization, we offer legal and technical assistance to governments and organizations seeking to move people out of institutions and develop community-based supports. You can learn more about all of these guys, but again, click on everything. We ain't ever going to get to the end of this string. We haven't really got into any sort of actual Fema content yet, but we do need to establish a little bit more about Keystone before we get into Fema, because we are going to be looking a little bit more at mass care and this Keystone 6 exercise. But Keystone, as you're seeing, this is the Keystone Human Services. We've heard that the DHS that is involved with that Keystone 6 national level exercise is the Department of Human Services, not the Department of Homeland Security, although I do suspect and probably already know that the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, are going to be active and overseeing this through the eyes of Fema. But they go back to this article, community-based services. They develop and provide community-based services to support people to fully participate in the community. So maybe it's like they're going to make slave labor out of these poor individuals that have got disabilities, or have a hard time with learning and stuff. Maybe they might find a way, just get, what they need to do is pull a lever and press a button. If we can train them to do that, and give them a Twinkie every couple of hours and a juice box, they'd be happy as Larry. That's how we can make them part of a social, part of a participating society. But they provide for inclusive education, make of that what you will. They provide consultancy and opportunities for school and educators to create fully integrated, inclusive education. Learn more. And then this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because at the bottom of the Keystone Human Services website, it's all about dogs and puppies and training dogs. Play area, but explore more intellectual disability services, autism services, mental health, nursing services, Head Start services, and assistance dogs. Keystone Institute is starting to look, and I'm pretty sure it is, and I haven't sort of traced it yet, but this is probably an extension of Tavistock. Tavistock in their transgender clinics, Tavistock in, or they're using Keystone for their sort of all-inclusive kids with disabilities clinics, centres and facilities, shelters. Some of them are going to be for parents, some of them are going to be for just kids on their own, and could they also be sort of experiment specimens, lab rats, Montauk kids waiting to happen, see if any of them have sort of special powers. But there you go, guys. There is some stuff about Keystone. We're probably going to have to come back to this as well, because this looks like a bit of a rabbit hole. It is going to get larger the more we dig, and probably a rabbit hole we'll never ever get to the bottom of. But with regards to this stream, let's go and look at FEMA. Let's go and look at some more massacre strategy plans in preparation, exercises in PDFs, in government documents, and other sort of good stuff that is involved with the mass care strategy, as well as looking more into the Keystone 6 national level emergency exercise about to be conducted in a little under 3 weeks' time.
The first thing that I want to say to all of you is that what I'm getting ready to share today is actually a lot of what I have learned over the years from children. Children living in communities at incredible risk to disaster, as well as things that I've learned from children who are fighting to recover from major disasters, and I acknowledge them and I thank them, as well as my many collaborators and students who have worked on these projects over the years. So first, a question. Why are we here today talking about children and emergency management, given all the number of topics that we could be talking about today? First, I think one of the reasons we're here today talking about children is because children make up a quarter of the population of the United States. There are nearly 74 million young people living in the US today, but children don't vote. Children don't participate in most of the organizations that are making decisions that have profound consequences for children's lives. And so their sheer numbers, but also their absence in terms of decision-making authority is one of the reasons that I think we're here today. But another reason that we're here today is because disasters oftentimes destroy the places where children live, where they study and go to school, and where they play. And so this is a really important topic, and I really appreciate you being a part of this conversation. So today, I'm going to organize my presentation into 3 parts. The first part, we're going to talk about progress that's been made in the area of children and disasters. During the second part, we're going to talk about some ongoing problems and challenges. And then in the third part, we're going to look at some possibilities. But first, I want to tell you a story. And to tell you this story, I'm going to have to take you back several years to August of 2005. And to tell you this story, I also need to introduce you to a little girl who was 11 years old at the time of Katrina. And Sierra is one of the children that Alice Fothergill, a fellow sociologist, and I followed for nearly a decade after the storm so that we could understand what Katrina meant in her life and how her recovery would unfold. But the first time that Alice and I met Sierra, weeks after Hurricane Katrina, she told us this. She said that for her, the sound of Hurricane Katrina was the sound of people screaming. And Sierra's experience in Hurricane Katrina was traumatic and life-threatening. The day before Katrina made landfall, Sierra went to work with her mother, who worked at a local hospital in New Orleans. And Katrina made landfall, and that hospital where Sierra and her mother had taken shelter from the storm suffered serious damage in the storm. The generators were in the basement of the hospital, and they ultimately failed in the disaster. And Sierra and her mother spent 4 long days and 3 terrifying nights in that hospital. After 4 days, they were rescued by fellow survivors in a boat, and they were taken to the Superdome, which is a so-called refuge of last resort. And they spent another day in the Superdome, and then after spending a day there, they then got in a van with other Katrina survivors, and they joined the wave of hundreds of thousands of Katrina survivors who were scattered all across our United States. Sierra and her mother eventually landed about 2 hours to the west of New Orleans in the town of Lafayette, Louisiana, and they took shelter in another mass shelter there, the Cajun Dome, where they spent about a month after the storm. Years after the storm, when we asked Sierra to reflect on her experiences during that time, she said this. 6th grade year was, I don't know, I was kind of angry, and I didn't want to be in anything or do anything, and I was just very angry. And I was mad because I wasn't with family, and I was missing my aunt so much because I was living close to my aunt before Katrina. I was missing all my family and my friends and the people that were really close to me that loved me the most. Has there been progress since Hurricane Katrina? I am glad to stand before you today to say that, yes, there absolutely has been progress. A few years after Hurricane Katrina, a federally appointed commission, the National Commission on Children and Disasters, came together, and they did a major study of children's preparedness, response, and recovery, where we were at as a nation, and they made recommendations about where we need to go. And one of the many important takeaways of that report was this: the unique needs of children must be more thoroughly integrated into planning and made a clear and distinct priority in all disaster management activities. Today, here we stand together in 2018, and it's hard to imagine a checklist of vulnerable populations or special needs populations that doesn't include children and youth on that list. And so we made progress in that regard. We also have a wide range of materials that are available that are targeted specifically for children and youth, for educators, for parents and caregivers, as well as for emergency managers that are about trying to help encourage preparedness when it comes to children and youth in disasters. On the scholarly end of the spectrum, we've also seen a real and dramatic increase in the number of publications that focus specifically on children in disasters. And in fact, over this decade alone, nearly half of all of the publications that focus on children in disasters have appeared in this decade alone. And what that has meant is that a lot of those materials that we now have are based on this important evidence. So there has been real progress, but problems still remain. And so in order to think about the problems when it comes to children and disasters and vulnerability, I want you to think about this tree. And with the trunk of the tree is really the heart of the problem. That even though there's been progress, children remain among the most vulnerable populations to disasters in this nation and the world over. And by almost every account, the exposure that children are experiencing to disasters today and into the future is increasing. And so what this means is that children of today and children of the future, they are coming of age in a world that is drier and hotter and more subject to extreme weather events than at any other point. And this is going to continue to be the future. When disasters strike and children are affected by disasters, their vulnerability may be in terms of physical impacts. So children may experience death, injury, or illness in the face of disaster. They also may experience psychological or educational impacts. So children may be subject to post-traumatic stress disorder. They may experience depression or anger. They also, when it comes to their schooling, may have delay, diminished educational attainment, or they may even drop out of school. If you think back to what Sierra said as she was thinking about her time after Katrina, she was angry, she was depressed, she was stressed because she was away from all the people that she loves in her life. And she also had a really hard time transitioning to a new school after Katrina. And she told us that for even months after the storm, that when she sat in her school classroom, she wasn't really able to listen. She wasn't really able to learn because she was so worried about the other things that were unfolding in her family and in her community and back home in New Orleans. And so these consequences are real. But in order to understand why children are vulnerable in disaster and which children are the ones who are most likely to suffer the most severe effects and the longest term consequences of disaster, that's where we have to move to the root of the tree. And we have to start thinking about what are the root causes of children's vulnerability if we're ever going to do something about it. And so when we talk about root causes of vulnerability, oftentimes we're talking about personal factors, but also contextual factors. And so what does that actually mean? When we talk about personal factors, oftentimes we're talking about characteristics of the child. How old is the child? But it's not age alone that makes a child vulnerable to disaster, because other than the youngest children, infants and very young children who may be completely dependent on adults, most older children and adolescents also have capacities. And so when we think about their vulnerability, it's not just age alone. It's how does age intersect with other characteristics like race and gender and social class status, ability, health, and so forth. But it's not just the child either, right? It's also about the characteristics of the broader environment where the child lives and goes to school. And so what is the child's family like? What's the social and cultural context like? The economic context? How is the natural environment and the built environment where the child lives? And so the big takeaway here when we think about the root causes of vulnerability, the thing to remember is that even though we put children on checklists of who are the vulnerable populations in disaster, which sort of seems static, right? Like you're a child or you're not a child. But when it comes to vulnerability, vulnerability is actually situational and dynamic. And so think of it like this. What if a child lives in a safe home, a brand new home that's been built to the highest codes and standards, but if every morning a child gets on a school bus and then they go to an old school building that's built of unreinforced masonry and it's located in earthquake country, which means that that school building might collapse when an earthquake happens. And so that child may not be vulnerable at home, but they may be vulnerable in another place. And so that's something we always have to keep in mind when we think about vulnerability. Now, because there are many, many different root causes or drivers of children's vulnerability, that also unfortunately means that there is no one simple, straightforward solution for what we might do to try to lower or reduce children's vulnerability. But the good news is that also means that there are many possibilities that are available to us when we think about moving forward as a nation to try to always focus on how do we reduce children's exposure to hazards, how do we reduce their vulnerability, and how do we ultimately build up their capacities and their strengths. What are the concrete steps that we might be able to take as an emergency management community together to do these things? And so I'd like to close today by offering what I think are 5 possibilities for moving us forward when it comes to reducing vulnerability and building capacity. So first and foremost, I think that we as a nation are in a place where we could commit together to say that we are going to ensure that every child in this nation attends a safe school. We require children to be in school. And when they don't show up for school, they get in trouble or their parents get in trouble. But we are not required to ensure that school buildings where we're requiring those children to show up are safe. But the good news is we have all of the knowledge that we need to make those school buildings safe. So we have examples, amazing examples from international partners who are doing amazing work around the world in terms of school building safety. And we also have guidance in this nation to help us better prepare for disasters, to plan for recovery, and also to make sure that our school buildings are being built in a safe way or being retrofitted so that they are safe for children. Second possibility. We are ready and we can educate children about the risks that they face and also about the actions that they can take to reduce those risks. Sometimes there's a lot of questioning about whether we should actually be talking to children about risk. Is that going to worry children if we talk to them too much about it? But here's the reality. Risk is all around us. A disaster occurs somewhere around the world every day. There's a disaster somewhere around the world. Risk is real, risk is increasing, and research shows that when we don't talk to children about risks, it doesn't go away. Instead, what children report is that actually makes them more anxious and more nervous when they don't have those conversations. And so we need to talk about risk, but also always accompany that conversation with what we can do about the risk. Third possibility, we need to make sure, as we're educating children, that we're also listening to and involving children in our emergency management activities. Sometimes when we think about education, we think about us as expert and children as receivers of knowledge. But that's not actually right. That children are also creators of knowledge. And one way to actually make this concrete, to think about this, so for all the students who are here right now, think about if I said to you, hi, I know that you live in New Jersey and you are potentially vulnerable to hurricanes. So what I'd like you to do, everybody in here, take out your notebooks And I'm going to tell you the 10 things that you need to do so that you can be prepared for hurricanes. And then you write that down, right? Or I hope you write it down. But then imagine what this would look like if instead of me telling you what to do, if I passed out all these blank sheets of paper to all of you in this room, and I started with a question. And what if I started with this question? What is so important to you that if you lost that thing, that you feel like you couldn't live without it? Will you write that down on this piece of paper? All of a sudden, that sort of evacuation plan and hurricane go kit takes on a very different perspective, right? So we need to listen to children. And this idea of listening to children, this isn't a new idea. Nearly 30 years ago, the United Nations adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and Article 12 of that charter says that children have a right to be heard. They have a right to express themselves about issues that they confront in their lives. Right now, it's hard to think of more pressing issues that are confronting children's lives than hazards and disasters and school safety issues. And so children have a right to be heard, but it's also really important that we do more than just listen. We also really need to be thinking about how can we actively involve children in emergency management, in preparedness, response, and recovery activities. We found after Katrina that children helped in so many ways after that storm. They helped adults, they helped other children and youth, and they also did things to help themselves to recover after that disaster. So children can help, and children oftentimes express a desire to want to help, but sometimes we don't have outlets available to engage children and youth and to make sure they have that opportunity to be involved. Fourth possibility, I think that we need to go even further in terms of encouraging children's ingenuity and their creativity. Kids know things, and kids know how to do things. After the 2011 Christchurch earthquake sequence, thousands of young people showed up, and they wanted to help after that devastating disaster. And it was the youth, through the Student Volunteer Army, who developed through software and using Google Maps and other imagery, they were the ones who figured out how to organize as student volunteers and how to deploy so they could help with that disaster response and the ongoing recovery. We also need to make sure that as we're engaging in preparedness and response and recovery activities, that we are opening up spaces to allow children and youth to express themselves in creative ways. Because we know that this can be really important for children to be able to articulate what is happening in their lives and what they need to help them to process major events. Sierra, who you met at the beginning of this talk, she really struggled for a period of time after Katrina. And she ended up enrolling in a creative arts program where she had an opportunity to express herself through poetry. And as we interviewed her over the years after Katrina, one of the things that she told us was that those creative art programs were so important to her recovery. And so right now, I want to share with you one of the poems that she wrote as part of her recovery. Hey, you. Yeah, you, the one in the corner who teased me for being so quiet. Well, listen up. I've got something to say. I found the courage to stand up for myself. I found the words to show who I am. I found the voice to speak my thoughts, my fears, my dreams, myself. So you, yeah, you, the one that scared me to be so quiet, pick up a pen, find who you are, let yourself be free through poetry. Fifth and final possibility that I want to share today is that we need to make sure that we're cultivating anchors, advocates, and strong institutions for children. Sierra recovered after this disaster, not just because of things she did herself or for herself. She also recovered because she had strong family anchors. She had advocates who are out in institutions who are working on behalf of children and children's needs. And so to end today, I want to ask you, what possibilities do you see when it comes to children and disasters and reducing vulnerability and building capacity? And what concrete steps are you ready to take? Thank you so much for your attention. So that's a really, really good question. And I think right now, actually, one of the understudied areas in the sociology of disaster is really related to exactly that topic, and related to how are children and youth using social media in all kinds of hazards and disaster contexts. And so how are they using social media when they're preparing for or thinking about risks? How are they using it when a disaster is actually unfolding? And so that's actually an area that is a really important area for study and further investigation. So I think you're really onto something important there. So thank you so much.
Once again, folks, we find ourselves at Find Friends at Fema's website, fema.gov, and you can see at the very top there it says an official website of the United States government. And we're going to look a little bit more into mass care, having taken just a short video interlude to give you guys a rest from me constantly reading, and also your eyes a rest from having to see the words on the screen and probably inadvertently reading them yourself. And as there is so much to sort of digest in some of these documents, I felt it doesn't hurt to sort of break it up a little bit if we can. But key planning factors and considerations for response and recovery from a biological incident introduction. And the table of contents, while you read, cross-cutting considerations. KPF 1, detect and characterize the threat. KPF 2, communicate with external partners and the public. KPF 3, control the spread of disease. And what could that be controlled in? It's control how far it spreads. Can be one or two things, you can control it in the right direction, make sure it's a controlled release in the right area perhaps, or control it from spreading any further. KPF 4, the augment provision of mass care and human services. So this is all about mass care, folks. I should have probably highlighted that at the start, but you probably figured out, as I did tell you in the previous segment. Well, the provision of mass care and human services to the affected population. 4.1, mass care considerations for shelter-in-place or restricted movement scenarios. 4.2, massacre considerations for feeding operations during larger scale / longer duration scenarios, and non-evacuation scenarios in brackets. Mass care considerations for evacuation and post-evacuation scenarios, service animals and household pets, community reception centers, decontamination support, public fear and mental health impacts, federal assistance for mass care and human services. KP5 is augment provisions of health and medical services to the affected population. Warning, guys, this is a long one. KPF 6, augment essential services to achieve recovery outcomes. Planning, decision support and modeling resources for biological incidents. Listing of references and appendices. Search this document, key planning factors for a biological incident. And you can search this document there. But 4.3. Mass care considerations for evacuation and post-evacuation scenarios. Certain types of biological incidents may call for the evacuation of one or more elements of the affected population. An incident involving a large-scale dispersion of a biological agent that can persist in the environment potentially as a result of an attack or an accidental release. I've just accidentally released a pungent, toxic dose of a gas from my rectum. No, I haven't. Just sort of the accidental release reminded me of something from another time in another place. But could the result in the need for people in the affected area to evacuate the impacted structure or area? See KPF 3, control the spread of disease, for further discussion of evacuation and sheltering. If homes have been contaminated with a persistent biological agent, expanded mass care services, example temporary housing, may be needed to be provided for the affected population. Lingering contamination. Do you have to let it linger? Do you have to? I don't really like the Cranberries, but that song Lingering also reminded me of blow-offs, farts, like you can imagine, like the old man letting one rip and then the wife saying, oh, do you have to let it linger, love? That's fucking terrible. It's lingering in the air. Do you have to let it linger? Maybe you won't see that song the same way after me saying that, but I do try to sort of provide a little bit of comedic relief from some of these government documents, but they provide some support for the affected population that may be suffering from lingering contamination or exposure concerns. Following these types of biological incidents, these may delay recovery activities, or they might extend recovery timelines, potentially prolonging survivors' needs for mass care. So sort of like the longer you leave the survivors waiting for mass care, the larger the likelihood they're not going to need any care if they've been contaminated long enough, if you know what I mean. It might just be a case of sort of putting them out of their misery and making them sort of as comfortable as possible before that happens. But evacuation may also be caused by another type of disaster happening concurrently with a biological incident. Now, funny enough, some of these recent disasters that Fema have been carried out have sort of contained a disaster within a disaster. Like, there was one example that there was a hurricane that hit a location, and then the hurricane then resulted in sort of a power out, grid down situation. There was no communications, no internet, no Wi-Fi. And as a result of that, a further disaster within a disaster was the addition of a traffic incident that had mass casualties as a result of that hurricane and grid down scenario. So they're talking here about a concurrent disaster happening within a biological incident, such as they say there, a hurricane, flood, and wildfire, a series of major tornadoes impacting an area already facing an epidemic. And guys, just a reminder, Keystone 6, the national level exercise about to take place in little under 3 weeks' time, is an exercise that will be a scenario of a series of large, high impacts over an area of the United States. It is a mass casualty exercise. It is an exercise that will require the temporary shelter within the parameters of the exercise and training drill to house up to 100,000 people for 9 months. Quite the disaster exercise if they are going to have actors playing the part of detainees, refugees or disaster survivors that need to be housed for the next 90 months. And we also saw in part 2 of this FEMA Files series that FEMA were requesting for vendors to provide turnkey sheltering systems or operations, and that is where we did look at those photographs sent in to us by a boots on the ground roving reporter who wants to remain anonymous, but NoOneWatchesArDee viewer, a Nowrdian, put his words into action, went out and provided us with those photos of that Amazon warehouse that is looking a lot like a FEMA facility waiting to be put in action. But these types of concurrent disaster events may result in significant needs for adapted massacre services. Natural disasters can result in major evacuation and or sheltering of populations, and a concurrent biological incident may pose threats to traditional feeding and sheltering activities. Conventional procedures for assisting disaster survivors and providing massacre services may need to be modified to prevent disease transmission among survivors and service providers. And there's a photograph there of, I guess, some FEMA operatives and an exercise handing out some provisions to actors playing the part of refugees or disaster victims. And there's some mass care being demonstrated for you there. Here's a bottle of water, son. I hope you feel all right and find your mum soon. We'll try and reunite you with them. But we're waiting to see if or not your mum and dad do actually need some mass care, or whether we can save a buck or two by letting nature or the biological disaster hazard taking its natural course of action. But figure 31, concurrent disaster events and epidemics may complicate shelter and evacuation. 78, not sure what that is, maybe an appendix. But in both cases, the transmissibility of the pathogen involved may constrain. I mean, this is very precise planning for preparedness, guys. If you see what I'm saying, it's almost like, they thought of every possibility, and like, let's put this into some sort of PDF and document so that we can work from should it ever happen. And as I said, very, very specific. Biohazard and a fucking outbreak of a disease within a disaster. Disasters within disasters, but the pathogen involved may constrain the ability to provide massacre and emergency assistance to survivors. If sheltering is required, concentrated sheltering might be another way of saying that. Congregate sheltering may be suboptimal during an outbreak of an infectious disease, but this depends on whether the pathogen is transmissible from person to person, or is only able to be transmitted from environmental source. So sort of congregating them all together. If it is transmissible from person to person, then that is a sort of initial 101 concentration camp, concentrating people together, and then introducing viruses and disease to that concentrated population, and eventually the diseases and viruses will do the job for you. It is a little bit time consuming and not very hygienic or sanitary, which is why the National Socialists come up with the shower system. But if the agent is not transmissible between people, traditional congregate sheltering may be an option. If the agent is transmissible between people, alternative options such as non-congregate sheltering may be more appropriate. We are getting about halfway down this, guys. As I did warn you, it is a long one, but important to read this in its entirety. At least it's not 187 pages long, folks. That is an assurance I can give you. But 431, evacuation and sheltering. The type of scope and scale of the incident will influence the facilities and transportation services needed to support evacuation and sheltering needs. In addition to routine disaster response planning, planners should consider these additional questions when planning for evacuation and sheltering during a biological incident. With whom will you coordinate to understand public health requirements and orders for evacuees in the destination jurisdiction? Who is your contact at the public health agency? Don't know why I chose to read that part in that voice, but let me know if you enjoyed it. How will you know if there are travel restrictions in place that will limit the movement of the impacted population? Keystone 6, high impact training exercise, national level training exercise. I hasten to add, everyone is literally involved with this training exercise about to take place in a few weeks' time. But how will you know if he really loves you? And it's in his kiss is the answer. But how will you know if evacuees are required to be tested prior to arriving to another jurisdiction? How will you know if evacuated populations are required to be quarantined or isolated? As noted above, congregate sheltering or concentrated sheltering may be suboptimal during an outbreak of contagious diseases. Adherences to infection control protocols such as social distancing and enhanced cleaning and disinfecting would require congregate shelters to drastically adjust their operating procedures for both staff and shelter residents. I like how they call you shelter residents. The shelter residents need a shower. Go and contaminate some shelter residents. Operative Brown. Contact tracing may also be required, as well as a decontamination and separating those who are infected from those who are unaffected. And it also may be necessary and would increase burdens on staff and shelf residents. Shelters may need to provide PPE to reduce the spread of infection among evacuees and workforces. So once they've sort of evacuated these poor souls from the disaster of a hurricane or an earthquake or a tornado, although tornadoes and hurricanes are pretty much one and the same, but once they've got to the evacuation location, the concentrated shelters, then oh my goodness, what's happening to these poor victims that have already suffered? They're now suffering again as an outbreak of a contagion has occurred. But as a result of these challenges, back to the article, sorry, digressing is just adding to the time. Non-congregate shelters such as hotels, colleges and universities may be more feasible for sheltering survivors during a biological incident involving a contagious disease, as they provide a greater opportunity to separate individuals while providing needed mass care services. Additional subject matter expertise and surveillance/monitoring data may be needed, and it may need to be consulted to identify areas and facilities where massacre services can be safely located. In addition, the transmissibility of the pathogen also should be considered when planning feeding operations for any type of sheltering during a biological incident. Planners should recognize that some undeserved populations, such as individuals at lower socio-economical levels or non-documented residents, unhoused individuals, homeless folks, and persons with disabilities or limited mobility, may experience disproportionate impacts from biological incidents. These and other individuals may have limited financial reserves, and their income may be disrupted in the aftermath of an incident and or during the recovery activities. FEMA COVID-19 pandemic operational guidance for the 2020 hurricane season and the COVID pandemic operational guidance 2021 for guidance on safe operation of shelters during a contagious disease outbreaks are some hyperlinks there contained within this already long article, but we're not necessarily going to pay much attention to those, although the shelter, yeah, we'll probably come into the shelter one, guys, and it is all connected, I'm sure. Incremental introductions of these things helps normalize it and make us more accustomed and acclimated to these things. HHS CDC interim guidance for general population disaster shelters during the COVID-19 pandemic is another web page. DHS planning considerations, evacuation, shelter-in-place guidance for state, local, tribal, and territorial partners. That's from 2019. This is for critical considerations on accommodating the vulnerable populations in shelters. So those are some hyperlinks they've given to planners in regards to this mass clear. That's some further information to give you assistance in what is going on there. But coordination, this is an idea here that is stamped in it, and the coordination opportunity, coordinate with community public health authorities, HCCSs, and professionals such as social workers who are experienced in working with vulnerable populations to help develop plans that reflect the unique circumstances of a biological environment that will meet the needs of all persons recommended to evacuate and or shelter. Those including experiencing homelessness, individuals with service animals or pets, disabilities, mobility limitations or medical needs, children, the elderly, etc., etc. Now, Fema also does have some planning prep talk videos targeted at the elderly as well as children, and given a natural disaster and then the additional extra disaster of a biological outbreak, then you do got a lot of plausible disability to sort of remove the vulnerable from the equation and do your part in contributing to sustainable development goals, in sort of removing some of the individuals that may be a burden on society in the eyes of the powers that shouldn't be. Might be not necessarily be a bad thing. It might be considered an act of humanity. Putting those, and guys, Canada made medical assistance in death is putting people out of their misery who are a little bit depressed and having a bad day. But FEMA and the American Red Cross have assembled the pandemic sheltering kits that provide protective measures such as sanitation stations. Guys, do I have to tell you what that is? It is a SS. Sanitation stations might be showers. Hey guys, just take a shower, sanitize yourself. There's a sanitation station over there. We'll see you on the other side. And they never get to see anyone on the other side. They never get to leave the sanitation stations. Just hypothetical consideration for the avenues of alternative possibilities, not suggesting or saying for 1 minute that is what sanitation stations are. Just a coincidence that it is yet another SS reference when talking about facilities and shelters. They also do need privacy walls and gloves so that shelters can operate safely during biological incidents, and contact the American Red Cross for assistance in obtaining or building pandemic sheltering kits to help ensure that shelters operate safely. Again, guys, a little reminder, Keystone 6 national level training exercise taking place starting on May 20th through to the 23rd is a mass casualty exercise as a result of a series of high impacts that does need to see and carry out the exercise, conducting training drills for the housing of 100,000 refugees affected by the fictional disaster in the training exercise scenario. Taking action is going to suggest that determine the feasibility of establishing shelters, concentrated or non-concentrated, and identify what services your jurisdiction will provide during a biological incident and a concurrent other disaster. So they're sort of pretty much sort of saying it's a given that it's not just going to be a biological disaster. Something else is going to happen as well. So it's, it's going to be a earthquake or a hurricane followed by a biological disaster. It's going to be a biological disaster that then, while they're trying to sanitize people at the sanitizing station, a hurricane happens. Excuse me there, I did need to clear my throat. And do I got some water? A tiny thimble full worth of water. A thimble of water, never mind, don't know what I was trying to say there. But they also should establish agreements with appropriate facilities in your region to also serve as shelters. Hotels, colleges, universities are the examples they're given there, or your local Walmart, Target, or Amazon warehouse. Pre-designate shelters, especially non-concentrated sheltering locations, and also human services center locations. If multiple, ensure all support locations are linked to facilitate communications and to share information, including the tracking of patients and resources, and to maintain situational awareness. Ensure sites are made known to local hospitals, emergency medical service providers, law enforcement, and emergency relief services and partners. Coordinate with local public health and HCCs to ensure their operational plans are interfaced with the community response plans. Determine the safety measures for protecting against the spread of infection among the evacuees within the shelters and during transportation. Plan for workforce and other resource needs, including shortages of staff and PPE during a public health emergency. Identify methods to coordinate service delivery that maximizes the use of a virtual workforce. What will you need to know? How will transportation services to and from shelters limit disease spread? What purposes will shelters fill during a biological incident and concurrent other type of disaster? Example, a hurricane or a wildfire. My goodness, I haven't mentioned wildfires up until now. Think of the calamity, folks. Evacuees from a biological disaster that are now sheltering in a Fema concentration camp are now being warned, there's a wildfire, you're going to burn to death in your concentrated shelter. But don't worry, guys, just get yourself to the sanitizing station and sanitize yourself before the fire can contaminate you with its burning flames. Maybe the showering station or the sanitation station may have been inadvertently filled with hand sanitizer rather than cleansing products. They'll find out that the hand sanitizer is in fact a household napalm. But what are the corresponding best practices? Contamination stroke health screening. Again, we can contaminate you, but your health's been screened and you're too far gone, I'm afraid. Can't help you. Let's just point you in the direction of a pit you can lie in until you die. We've had some dug for some years. Sadly, the coffins have all been occupied by other corpses, but feel free to lie on the bodies of other corpses that weren't considered worth of decontaminating. Again, there's decontamination with a question mark. Limited medical evaluation and care, emergency first aid, temporary housing, disaster welfare information followed by a question mark, food service question mark. Actually, they've all got question marks, so I don't need to add that each and every time. But health and mental health services, ongoing health surveillances. Again, what facilities in your region are available to serve as shelters during a biological incident and concurrent other disasters? What are their capacities? How will they limit disease spread? How will you handle the shortage shelters, SS folks, or adequate space? How will you know if there are any staffing or resource constraints? How will you address workforce shortages at shelters if staff are unable to report in during a biological incident? What accommodations will be made for individuals in need of additional response assistance? How will populations with disabilities and populations living in institutional settings, older populations, children, those experiencing homelessness, and they kind of added the SS of homelessness at the end separately, SS populations with limited English proficiency, transient populations, tourists, students, hospitality workers, populations with mobility or transportational challenges, and populations in need of crisis counseling or mental health services. What a list, folks. Counseling or mental health services, among others, to be accommodated. And again, in question mark, should we accommodate these or just leave them to the mercy of the biohazard and the wildfire? Which non-governmental organizations or voluntary organizations, initial, I don't know what that stands for, VOD, and or private sector partners, will they be providing any sheltering? Will Walmart be stepping up to provide sheltering? I'm sure they will. But what processes will you use for prioritizing, who will be sheltered in non-concentration concentrated shelters when such facilities are limited? So no, it's a selection, folks, by the looks of things. What mental health services and are going to be available to those sheltering? 4.2, how far down are we? We're nearly at the end, folks. Mass care considerations for feeding operations during larger scale and longer duration scenarios. And non-evacuation scenarios, and there are some footnotes here. 78, Robert, we saw 78 earlier, so this is it was a footnote. Roberts K 2020 December 24. Camp Pendleton, commanding general, speaks to a community affected by fire, and there is a link for that. Divid's Hub, we've looked at Divid's Hub a few times in some of these FEMA related articles, I think in every one so far, maybe not, I don't know, but there is a hyperlink there. And this was actually last updated on March 14, 2024. Just over 2 weeks ago, guys, and there we are. I will confirm to you we did get to the bottom. The FEMA NTAS, National Terrorism Advisory System. We might have to look at that in one of the 2 remaining FEMA files, part of 5 nights at FEMA. So there you go, guys. Some recent information for you to digest and to make of it what you will. I did provide you some thoughts and opinions that would take you along the avenues of alternative possibility and alternative thinking. I'm not suggesting or saying for 1 minute that is what is going on. Just let's take that into consideration as a possibility of some of the dual purposes that could be contained within this massacre. Key planning factors and considerations for response and recovery operations to a biological incident that then will have a current other disaster, whatever that may be, of the choosing of the powers that shouldn't be. So that concludes this government document. Let me give you another little brief video interlude before we come back with what will probably be another government document about FEMA mass care or the Sigma 6 national level exercise about to take place in a little under 3 weeks' time.
We are the National Domestic Preparedness Consortium. Our mission is to identify, develop, and deliver innovative, high-quality training and education to secure and prepare a safe and resilient nation. The NDPC was established by Congress in 1998 under the Nunn-Lugar-Dominici Act. Our mission was originally focused on countering the threat posed to the United States by weapons of mass destruction. Today, the NDPC prepares state, local, tribal, and territorial first responders for a wide range of threats that face our nation. Program managed by FEMA's National Training and Education Division, NDPC training is offered at no cost to approved recipients. The NDPC is comprised of 7 member organizations who all have unparalleled expertise in their topic areas. Our member organizations are FEMA's Center for Domestic Preparedness, Louisiana State University's National Center for Biomedical Research and Training and Academy of Counterterrorist Education, or LSU NCBRT ACE, Texas A&M University's National Emergency Response and Recovery Training Center, the Security and Emergency Response Training Center, or CERTC, New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology's Energetic Materials Research and Testing Center, or EMRTC, the Center for Radiological Nuclear Training at the Nevada National Security Site, or CTOS, University of Hawaii's National Disaster Preparedness Training Center. The NDPTC training focuses on natural hazards, coastal communities, and the special needs and opportunities of islands and territories. CTOS is the leader for radiological, nuclear weapons of mass destruction terrorism training. New Mexico Tech EMRTC is the preeminent expert preparing America to prevent and respond to incidents involving explosives. CERTC is a state-of-the-art training facility near Pueblo, Colorado, specializing in hazardous materials and weapons of mass destruction response for all forms of surface transportation. Texas A&M's NERTC provides critical training in incident command, emergency medical services, public works, and cybersecurity. LSU's NCBRT ACE expertise is focused on specialty law enforcement, biological incidents, and terrorist threats to our nation's food sources. The CDP is FEMA's premier all-hazards training facility, offering courses to 17 first responder disciplines with special emphasis on mass casualty incidents and events involving hazardous chemicals and biological materials. Additionally, the NDPC works in close partnership with the Rural Domestic Preparedness Consortium, addressing the needs of our nation's smaller communities. NDPC topics are selected through using a robust needs assessment. Our courses undergo rigorous evidence-based development prior to receiving DHS certification. After initial certification, each course is evaluated and recertified every 3 years. NDPC instructors come from a wide range of backgrounds, including current and former responders, emergency managers, scientists, and medical professionals. All instructors undergo a formal application and certification process as well as periodic assessments. A number of NDPC classes are provided at cutting-edge residential facilities, but the majority are mobile deliveries for responders across the nation. Some NDPC classes are also available remotely or online. NDPC class scheduling is coordinated through state administrative agencies and designated tribal representatives. The NDPC can work with agencies to meet the scheduling needs of various shifts, weekends, and holidays if necessary. NDPC members work closely with our stakeholders to implement training strategies that fulfill identified training gaps in multi-year plans or support national special security events. Since our beginning in 1998, the NDPC has reached 3,296,915 participants at the state, local, tribal, and territorial levels. NDPC training has made a real and lasting impact on U.S. national security. The NDPC is a national training resource funded to improve our nation's safety and security when faced with a wide variety of threats. Let us know how we can support you. To learn more about the NDPC's resources, visit our website at ndpc.us.
I did tell you we would probably be coming back to another government website to read another government article, and I didn't lie to you folks. We are once again at FEMA.gov for another official website to the United States government, FEMA-related article. Now, although this is actually dated 29th of June 2023, it was actually updated 6 days ago at time of recording, and it is reunification support. It is about, reunification support. And there you can see release date June 29th, 2023. But national and human caused disasters, including catastrophic events, often separate individuals from their personal and community support systems. There's your SS in this article, folks, as well as resources typically used in a time of crisis. FEMA coordinates with the whole community partners to increase awareness of these vulnerabilities and to access resources to support reunification efforts before, during, and after the disaster. The National Reunification Committee, collaboratively led by FEMA, Mass Care and Emergency Assistance, and also the Red Cross and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, identifies reunification support for adults, children, and family with pets. FEMA coordinates deployment of national reunification resources, both human and material, to support state, tribe, and territorial STT-led reunification efforts and field operations. There is a cost share for some resources. Now, remember that article we saw about Keystone Human Services, and once we finished that article, it was all about pets at the bottom. Are they going to do something about eradicating the pets from societal equations? We're no longer going to be able to keep pets as part of sustainable development goals, but authorities, sections 402, 403, and 502 of the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, Public Law 93288, as codified at 42 USC 517A, 517OB, and 5192. Section 689B, 689C of the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act of 2006, Public Law 109295, as codified at the USC 55, is that 77 and 77, excuse me there. But FEMA's responsibilities is to provide both pre-disaster and post-disaster reunification support, such as human and technological resources, to reconnect individuals as quickly as possible. Following a disaster, FEMA coordinates reunification efforts with the support of National Center of Missing and Exploited Children and the American Red Cross, as well as state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, non-government organizations, and other federal agencies, partners for these efforts. They promote family communications, planning, and preparedness, as well as facilitate notification from inside to outside disaster areas, helping displaced individuals initiate contact with loved ones to communicate they are in a safe location, respond to requests by family or friends outside of the disaster area who are concerned about the well-being of loved ones possibly impacted by the disaster, and to prioritize requests for wellness checks for displaced loved ones inside disaster-impacted area who have physical or mental health issues, or someone who may have a function or access needs. Pre-incident, they will provide technical assistance, support federal and STT reunification plans training materials, exercises, and other capacity building tools. So pre-incident, they will provide training. The national level exercise is a training exercise that is being provided by Fema as part of the mass care strategy and part of the Department of Human Sources, Keystone 6 Department, the Keystone Human Services. We've looked at all of these. Is the exercise going to precede the disaster? Is the disaster coming? Is this exercise just the excuse to put in everybody in place, ready and waiting, just as they were on September the 11th, as we've seen in the first part of these FEMA files? Is this about to happen? Guys, there are echoes of post-September 11th, 2001 in contemporary times. All this national level exercise, all these exercises, all these drills, all these FEMA force field operations being conducted, all these campus riots, all these hurricanes, all these earthquakes, all of this I truly believe is connected. You don't have to believe that. Make of it what you will. I am just trying to provide as much information as I possibly can regarding FEMA and who is carrying out these exercises, and just some of the things they have documented in protocols written for PDFs to provide system assistance and guidance for employees, as well as protocols, procedures, methods, and practices to put into effect during a vast variety of scenarios, to prepare you guys for the alternative possibility that they are planning for a disaster. They are going to stage another false flag event, and they are going to use that false flag event to usher in new, more draconian measures, tighten the grip on the Patriot Act, and provide long-term sheltering situations for maybe undesirables, low-income folks, burdens on societies indefinitely. It's some of these concentrated facilities that they have been talking about, although they didn't call them concentrated. That is a word that I've replaced with the word conglomerative, wasn't it? Something like that. But they also want to develop, back to the article, agreements with partners and providers for reunification resources and support services. There's another SS for you folks, to include communication systems to provide survivors with a wide range of communication methods in a timely manner, provide subject matter expertise to internal FEMA partners, including FEMA's response, recovery, logistic management, and national preparedness directorates, the Public Assistance Division, the Office of Disability Integration and Coordination, the Office of External Affairs, the Office of Senior Law Enforcement Advisors, and the National Processing Service Centers. Also to identify communication mechanisms, including but not limited to reunification systems, current and emerging social media tools, communication technologies and equipment, and private/public resources, to determine practical approaches to address the communication access needs of the people who are deaf or hard of hearing, people without speech, people who have cognitive or intellectual disabilities, as well as people with limited English. Response and recovery. How much longer? We're about halfway through this one, folks. Upon a presidential declaration, coordinate with other federal agencies, SLTTs and NGOs and other partners to monitor, analyze, and validate and provide human and material resource support programs and services to support reunification efforts for displaced children and adults. So it looks like they're planning and they have contingencies for separations of families, and will all families be reunified, or will some families never be reunited ever again? But they also need to facilitate the reunification of displaced children with their families and the voluntary reunification of adults with their families during presidentially declared emergencies or major disasters as required by law. Interesting word in there, folks. Provides subject matter expertise and technical assistance in the National Response Coordination Center, as well as regional and field offices. Provides staff and resources to support field operations. This includes focused efforts on groups such as individuals with disabilities, older adults, people with access and functional needs, youth and children. Assist SLTT integrated reunification support services systems, there's a triple S there, for evacuees and survivors, including individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, people without speech, or people with intellectual disabilities or cognitive issues, and people with LEP. Provide resources including equipment, material supplies, facilities, and personnel to support STT operations. Activate the NCMEC contract to stand up the National Emergency Child Locator Center and deploy Team Adam to assist families by providing child reunification services. Trigger for implementation, a presidential emergency or a major disaster declaration under the Stanford Act. So those are the things that they can trigger all of this into implementation through, those two things, a presidential emergency or a major disaster declaration. Some of the tools and resources they have available. Fema maintains a readiness contract with NCMEC to support the activation of the National Emergency Child Locator Center and to deploy Team Adam to support the reunification efforts of SLTTs. Fema also maintains a resource and information sharing agreement with the American Red Cross, the United States Department of Justice, and the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Fema, along with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the American Red Cross, co-lead the National Reunification Committee. The Red Cross and Fema reuniting children doesn't sound healthy or wholesome to me, but to some it probably will. But the Reunification Committee, which provides a national platform for collaboration and partners and stakeholder engagement. The National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children is a call center activated by STT request to support SLTTs, law enforcement agencies, and the general public in identifying, tracking, and locating children separated from their parents or legal guardians as a result of a presidentially declared disaster or emergency. Team Adam is a program that provides a rapid on-site assistance to law enforcement agencies and families during a critical case involving missing children. Critical case, CC. These are all hyperlinked, guys. And again, if we were to click on each and every one of these hyperlinks, it would be a never-ending stream. Whoa. Unaccompanied minors registry is available 24 hours a day, per day, 7 days per week for people to report or request information on a missing child. Additional national resources are the National Mass Care Strategy Reunification Support, that is what we're reading now, Multi-Agency Reunification Services Plan Template, Post-Disaster Reunification of Children, a nationwide approach. So it looks like there's going to be a nationwide reunification agenda in the future. Why are all these children going to be separated rather from their families? It warrants such all these reunification efforts. But the Red Cross welfare checks, contact 1-800-RED-CROSS if you wish to do so. Do that. That number again, 1-800-RED-CROSS. local tariffs may be applicable. But emergency welfare inquiry, an inquiry about someone within the affected area who has a serious pre-existing health or mental health condition or a functioning access need, a family reunification. So a family has to request to be reunified, it seems here. A request about a multiple family or household members who have been separated as a result of a disaster. You have to request for FEMA to help you be reunified. A general welfare inquiry is a general inquiry looking for someone within the affected area, and a military welfare inquiry is a request by a member of the military connected community, in brackets there, active duty, reserve, National Guard, retired, veteran, or their family members, searching for the same within the affected area. And a VIP inquiry is a request from a partner organization's elected officials or Red Cross leadership to locate missing persons. So locating very important people would probably be the top of the list of FEMA's priorities, especially if there are partners or contributors to this. And thus concludes that government document. And at the moment, guys, I do not entirely know where we are going to know next, but we will know when we do get there, which will be in a click of a finger for you. But I am going to take a little break to take some nicotine and liquid refreshment, probably visit the bathroom before thinking how we will finish this up, and we will probably be finishing it up at Keystone 6 national level exercise about to take place in a little under 3 weeks time. So I'll see you on the other side in the next segment, folks.
The purpose of the Disaster Recovery Center is to really be that one-stop shop where you can come in, provide documentation, register, discuss your case, but also to talk to some of our partners.
The Small Business Administration is co-located with the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
We are the primary source of funds for not only businesses of all sizes, most nonprofits, including houses of worship, but also homeowners and renters. So at a DRC, what one can expect to do is file an application, drop off loan documents, drop off items that they did not bring with them initially.
Oftentimes we have crisis counselors here to be able to assist you, just to talk to you and provide you some additional guidance when it comes to disaster assistance and maybe some resources that are out in the community. We love to involve our nonprofit partner organizations such as Catholic Charities, United Methodist. They have a strong case management program that will advocate and work with you on your recovery efforts moving forward.
If you sustain damage during the recent disaster event and require specialized assistance, when applying for disaster assistance, pay attention to question 24 about individuals with disabilities and others with access and functional needs. Answer yes to this question if you have a disability, require American Sign Language interpreters, special needs, or other medical or health condition. Answering yes is the best way to note any additional disability-related losses and or needs such as medical support assistance, durable medical equipment repairs, or replacement of assistive technology that was lost or damaged because of the disaster. The fastest and easiest way to register for FEMA assistance is by going online to www.disasterassistance.gov. Remember, if you need a reasonable accommodation or assistance filling out your FEMA application, please call the FEMA helpline at 800-621-3362. If you use a relay service, such as a video phone, InnoCaption, or CapTel, provide your contact number. Phone calls from FEMA may come from an unknown number. It's important that you answer FEMA's call. For more information, go online to www.fema.gov.
FEMA Region 1 has been increasing the culture of preparedness throughout New England by collaborating with our 6 state partners to bring their representatives as well as 2 of their colleagues from each state together recently in a disaster preparedness summit.
FEMA has been a critical partner of the Red Cross in this effort, really primarily through their network. We partner with FEMA to get the word out about our preparedness programs, especially in months like September, which is National Preparedness Month, so that we can reach more people and make more households safer.
Disasters begin and end locally in the state. Those people who know the people in the local communities, those people who know and are neighbors, are usually the first on scene and the first capability to assess and respond and also prepare the communities for disaster.
CERTs can work at community events such as we have an art festival that hosts like 100,000 people, and they are able to assist with parking, and they're just walking around for situational awareness. They've worked 5K races in the state where they can help do like MedPod distribution practice where they're handing out water, and sometimes standing with police officers in intersections and doing traffic control.
If you're trying to recruit volunteers that are part of the millennial generation or Gen Z, you're going to be using very different strategies than you would use if you were trying to recruit volunteers from an older generation. Every generation's different, but there's actually quite a few similarities between Gen Z and millennials. One of those being that a heavy use of technology, heavy reliance on technology. So if you are recruiting for volunteers and you don't have a social media page, if you're not using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, you're falling behind and you're going to be less attractive to these volunteers that are coming from this generation. If you have volunteer opportunities that allow these folks to work with individuals either through like mentoring or tutoring or education or doing construction projects or projects that involve them doing a lot of different things, that's going to be more attractive than having them sit down at a table and make thank you notes for local retirees.
I think the 6 State Preparedness Summit was a unique opportunity because it was a blue sky day or series of days where we all came together and we put preparedness front and center in our constituencies. And we had a great dialogue about how we can work better together on behalf of the states and promote preparedness, not only in National Preparedness Month in September, but throughout the year.
In the early years, 11 years ago, emotional and spiritual care, that phrase, or even disaster chaplaincy, was something that not a lot of people knew about or understood. And the whole landscape has changed substantially as people realize more that, from the early days of getting roads cleared and power back on and people out of shelters, that's great, but there's still a whole lot of internal issues, psychological, mental, emotional, and even in their spirit, that they still need to work through and need support for that. And disaster chaplaincy is one of the pieces of that puzzle to help restore the inside of people towards their resiliency.
Since Hurricane Irene, the Vermont Disaster Recovery Fund has been used multiple times. Hurricane Sandy followed. We also had we tend to get more localized flooding or disasters. So yes, it's an active fund. It's a very active fund. We presently have a reserve of about $2 million in the account. Some of the ways that we use the fund, it would include typically when we go in and assess a home, we can't help everything. The new norm is really what we're trying to achieve, and that would be to help the basics. Can we make it livable? Furnaces, for example, are one of the most common things that we replace. Electrical systems and other construction, typical construction where mold has come in. We've done mold remediation. We've now done reconstruction, and we've paid for that. We'll pay up to $20,000 per customer to our client to assist them to get back on their feet.
We don't often have the opportunity to have every state represented in a preparedness summit, and the commitment that the state directors made to provide their staff members and representatives from 2 other critical agencies from each state was very important. And we had an energized, informed collaboration of people who are the boots on the ground for disasters, and FEMA's part in that was we provide the connective tissue and the capability to bring them together as a whole.
Exercise program and FEMA logos. Chad Gorman, Director, FEMA National Exercise Division.
Exercises play a vital role in national preparedness, as the whole community prepares for disasters by planning, organizing, equipping, training, and ultimately exercising. We are able to both practice and refine our ability to confront a variety of threats and hazards.
A series of 3 photos. A group of people boarding the back of a C-130 plane on the runway of an airport. 3 people wearing safety vests, meeting in a huddle to discuss something, while a woman wearing a safety vest stands in the background, looking down at something. And a group of people sitting around a conference table, looking at a wall of monitors during a conference call.
FEMA leads national level exercises every 2 years as part of the National Level Exercise Program. We conduct a progressive series of preparedness events culminating in a full-scale exercise, which bring together and strengthen the whole community.
National Level Exercises text and the acronym NLE. 3 people reviewing a New York City hurricane evacuation zone map.
National level exercises help us test operational capabilities, evaluate plans and policies, and develop stronger working relationships across the nation.
Text. The Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act of 2006 states that the FEMA administrator shall conduct national-level exercises biennially. The PCEMR text remains on the bottom of the screen during a sequence of 4 photos showing responders participating in exercises and real-world events. The photos depict 1. A row of people sitting at their desks working on their computers. 2. A group of people talking about a digital map of the Midwest. 3. A group of responders review paperwork and provide directions in front of a FEMA pickup truck and a row of tractor trailers. 4. FEMA employees sit under a canopy in front of an open truck with equipment in the back.
Established by the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act, national-level exercises provide a chance for thousands of people from organizations across the United States to better prepare for catastrophic disasters or threats that pose the greatest risk to the nation.
A map of the United States displays icons indicating where national-level exercises have occurred and what threat they addressed. Icons depict earthquake, tsunami, hurricane, cyber attack, biological attack, chemical attack, and nuclear radiological attacks. A list of the previous 12 national-level exercises, beginning with Top Off 2000 and ending with NLE 2018, scrolls up the left side of the screen.
The Foundation for National Level Exercises started with Top Off, short for Top Officials, in the year 2000. The exercises have since evolved to include a broader range of participants. The exercise scenarios build upon real-world incidents and threats.
Photo displays responders from the 9/11 attacks in New York City. Photo displays post-hurricane disasters. A series of video footage of flooded streets from hurricanes during the 2017 hurricane season. A text box in middle of the screen says 150 plus days. Video footage of heavy rain falling, a large tree swaying in the rain, and a flooded beach.
Ranging from man-made attacks to natural disasters. For example, the unprecedented 2017 hurricane season highlighted the need for unity of effort across all levels of government and the private sector to restore critical services, including power and communications, to millions of survivors.
A map of the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States shows the path of the simulated hurricane in National Level Exercise 2018. 4 animated boxes denote the number of partners participating from different entities. 67 local jurisdictions, 5 states and the District of Columbia, 160 private sector organizations, and 91 federal departments and agencies.
The following spring, National Level Exercise 2018 built upon lessons learned during the 2017 hurricane season by providing participants an opportunity to respond to a simulated mid-Atlantic hurricane. During the exercise, local jurisdictions and the private sector joined forces.
Photos depict community lifelines. A utility worker repairing power lines with an energy icon in the bottom left corner. Workers repairing communications equipment with a communications icon in the bottom left corner. And a first responder providing medical care to a disaster survivor with a health and medical icon in the bottom left corner. 4 construction workers lift debris off of a road.
To focus on community lifelines such as energy, communications, and health and medical services, which are critical to sustaining lives and stabilizing an incident.
A map of the United States shows 5 animated boxes above it, representing the number of participating partners. The boxes include the following information. 12,000 plus individuals participated in NLE 2018, including 67 local jurisdictions, 5 states and the District of Columbia, 160 private sector organizations, and 91 federal departments. Box showing the number 450,000 and icons of military service members and their children stems from the 91 federal departments box on the right side of the map.
The exercise brought together more than 12,000 individuals across all levels of government, private industry, and non-governmental organizations. Additionally, more than 450,000 individuals participated in personal preparedness activities, including U.S. Navy and Coast Guard personnel who participated in accountability drills.
2 FEMA personnel in the field looking at their iPads. A United States Army medical helicopter flying over a flooded neighborhood.
FEMA also leveraged National Level Exercise 2018 to amplify hurricane preparedness messaging and to encourage wider adoption of flood insurance in advance of the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season.
A graphic with circles and animated text illustrating the whole community engagement process. The process shows individuals and communities and continues with nonprofit organizations, critical infrastructure, private sector business, state, local, tribal, and territorial partners, and federal departments and agencies.
When it comes to keeping our nation safe, everyone plays a vital role. You, your organization, and your community can collaborate on ways to better prepare for disasters by participating in national level exercises.
Chad Gorman on camera. Text box that says National Exercise Program logo. Chad Gorman, Director, FEMA National Exercise Division.
The national level exercise is fundamental to creating a culture of preparedness across this nation. That culture of preparedness starts with FEMA and it starts with you. Let's work together to make our nation, our communities, and our families more secure and resilient for the future.
The National Exercise Program and FEMA logos. The website, fema.gov/NLE, and the email nle@fema.dhs.gov.
For more information on national level exercises and ways to participate, please visit our website at fema.gov/NLE or contact nle@fema.dhs.gov.
When we first were in the hospital, in the state hospital, working with institutionalized people, we thought maybe there were a few people that could leave. and the shift over the years in terms of our own vision for the possibilities of people with disability and their families taking a place at the table, whether it's here in Harrisburg or if it's in Delhi or Chisinau, Moldova, wherever it is, like that we couldn't have imagined how that work would remain true to the values, but also exceed our expectations. Much of our work, both here in the US as well as abroad, in Moldova, India, and all the other places that we've worked, has been to shine the light on people with developmental disability and their families, and people with psychosocial disability and their families, so they don't get left behind in the movement, And I think that's always been a risk, and I think it continues to be a group of people that need to be promoted and supported to be included in the fight for justice, for a place at the table, for equality, and for their own rights to a good, full, meaningful, rich life. And that implies letting people have control over their lives, letting people experience the world and all the possibilities, and then make decisions about where their life is headed. Inclusion is about being with typical people in typical places, doing typical things in typical ways. And that kind of guidance has helped. We've always said we want to be small so that the people we serve can be big. And that remains a really hard balance, I think, for all service providers and all change agents to do. Advancing their lives, supporting them to live full lives, in many ways is a microcosm of trying to figure out how community and society can work for everybody. Increasingly, our services will shift from being a provider of services to being a facilitator of community. And I think that is a very powerful statement about our shifting role, in the lives of people with disability, in the communities in which we work, in the countries in which we work, is that the idea of facilitating people to lead full lives in the community is very exciting work, and it's work that we're well placed to do.
Life sharing to us is opening our home to individuals that can lead a meaningful life and be productive and learn to be independent. I saw what a difference it makes in somebody's life. I know it's certainly made a difference in mine.
I think they all come into the service wanting to help, but then once they realize how much they're learning from the individuals, as much as they're helping them learn and grow, that is the aha moment that I love to see in our providers.
Good life sharing provider, someone who has a lot of love, commitment, a lot of understanding, and a little patience.
We're really looking for that heart. That's the biggest component that we're looking for in a provider. They need to want to make a difference in someone's life. It is not just having someone come live with you, it's working on goals. It's making sure that everything, their supports are surrounding that person. Everything is person-centered.
They do have goals, and we do work on them. Sydney does volunteering. She enjoys going to the library, working on the computer, and she started exercise classes. She does Zumba.
I love going into the homes and seeing they're always included, even when they're not together, and just incorporating them, celebrating the milestones, the holidays. I just love seeing that.
Family.
Yeah, basically
that's what we are. We're family.
We are family. They're not treated any other way but family.
My name is Josh Rappaport. I am 36 years old. I enjoy listening to classical music. I also volunteer at the Harrisburg Symphony.
The volunteering at the HSO is wonderful for him. All the musicians know Josh.
He's been going since he's 13 years old.
I work at Hershey Park. I've been working there for 9 years.
My role as part of the ACAP team is to, if someone needs any services relating to employment, whether it's finding employment or sustaining employment, my role is to help with whatever they need.
So they did job coaching. He worked in an office, and they were there with him probably at least for the first month, if not more, just being with him and training him and making sure that he did what he needed to do.
I enjoy my job. I like to make customers feel satisfied.
People that I work with will literally tell you, I love my job, I love being here, I love that I'm part of a community and that I'm a working member of society, and that's really exciting that people, have that opportunity.
ACAP was the one who coordinated it, the job training, the follow-up insofar as independent living skills.
He has help with jobs. He has all kinds of support, people who care about him, and I think that's a good thing.
Oh, they work with me on behavioral skills and life skills.
But my goals are for him to be happy and healthy and productive, and to have friends, and just what anybody would want with their children.
And we're so very happy that we have people who care about that.
Susquehanna Service Dogs has had our dogs coming into the Capital Area Head Start's classrooms for many, many years, and they were getting so much benefit out of it. We're like, this would be a great opportunity to have Rico work full-time at Head Start.
A good facility dog is one that would be great with all kinds of people, really social, really likes to motivate the individuals that they're around, really encourage, social behavior and communication, and just helping people feel comfortable. Both Russet and Rico know how to do pressure, so that's if you're sitting on the floor with your feet out in front of you, they will lay on top of your legs. They also know lap, which is if you're sitting in the chair, they will come up and put their two front paws on their lap.
Rico and Russet are very sensitive to the needs of the children, and Rico was visiting a classroom where a little boy had lost his father. And Rico stayed with that child, and that child just kept hugging him and saying, I love you. It was building that bond. It was also helping him through the struggle of the loss of his parent.
One way the dogs help with gross motor skills is playing ball outside. And we'll throw a ball. They run with the dog to get the ball, and then they're excited, and then they run back. And
in the fine motor, the children will draw pictures of the boys, and then they'll start writing the letters of their names for, Rico, R, Russet, and
children love to communicate with Rico and Russet. They can open up children who might not always be comfortable talking to grown-ups or their peers.
A lot of our children are dual language learners. We had one little girl, it was the spring at this point, she hardly talked in class. She was a huge fan of Russet. And I remember her bringing over and saying, here's your pretzel. And that's the first time I really heard her say even a statement.
We have facility dogs in a lot of different types of facilities, not just in the Head Start classroom. We have dogs in other classrooms throughout Pennsylvania. We also have dogs in courthouses. We also have dogs in hospitals. We just had our second dog place with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. We have a few other hospitals on our waiting list to receive facility dogs to help with children that are receiving treatment in their facilities. And we see how well these dogs are working in the classrooms, and their children are doing amazing things, and grandchildren are doing amazing things as well.
Being respected, included, listened to, is very important. It gives people opportunity. Just because doesn't mean that because you have a disability, you can't have opportunities.
They want to be heard, their voice. Give respect, inclusion. A great way of including is within the decision making. What do you want to do with your life? And how can I help you achieve that?
about listening to respect and how us as people could make it better.
It changes them a lot. They're opening up. They're seeing that they're not just stuck in one path. They can spread.
I'm actually glad and proud of myself because usually I don't speak up for myself, and now I'm starting to speak out and up for myself. We discuss like activities that we want to do. We've written to a lot of different people to see if they can help us.
They have a voice, challenging them to go beyond what they're capable of doing, to get the experience of, just going out in the community and just being a part of it. You have a voice. You're important. I want to know what's on your mind.
So welcome back to more government websites, once again at fema.government. Hopefully again that little video interlude did provide a little gap in having to listen to me reading articles. And this article again from FEMA, an official website to the United States government, programs to support disaster survivors. Now, in addition to the individuals and households programs, FEMA has several other programs designed to support disaster survivors, and at the very, very top of that list is mass care and emergency assistance, crisis counseling, interesting, crisis acting, crisis counseling assistance and training programs, care management, legal services, unemployment, voluntary agency coordination, referral list, and additional resources. So mass care and emergency assistance services are provided immediately before a potential incident and during the immediate response to an incident. Staff and resources are deployed to local response centers, and mass care and emergency assistance services are provided immediately before a potential incident and during the immediate response to an incident. The staff and resources are deployed to response centers and located response centers that are located in the affected areas. All impacted survivors are eligible to receive assistance, and activities supported include sheltering, congregate and non-congregate feeding, distribution of feeding supplies, support to owners and their household pets, service and assistant animals. We've heard a lot of this before. Supports to adults and children with disabilities. Mass evacuee support, reunification of adults and children, review our guidance and planning considerations for providing mass care during a pandemic. And here you go, guys. If you so wish to do so, you can search for shelters near you just by texting shelter and your zip code to 43362. And an example they give is shelter 12345. Okay then, but you may look up shelters anytime through the American Red Cross sheltering map. Let's come back and click on that. Or by downloading the FEMA app. The commonly used sheltering items CUSI catalog is a compilation of items focused on meeting the needs of survivors in the shelter environment and other congregate settings. FEMA maintains agreements with partners related to these items, so these items can be more easily provisioned during a disaster. And one of those partners would be Walmart. crisis counseling assistance and training program. So this is where I wanted to come to, guys. Let's make it a little bit larger so I can read it easier. Counseling assistance and training program provides supplemental funding to state, tribal, and territorial governments and non-government organizations to assist disaster-impacted individuals and communities from recovering from disasters through community-based outreach and psychoeducational services. The goal is to aid survivors in recovering from the adverse reactions to disasters and to begin to rebuild their lives. Service offered are non-clinical and anonymous and include supportive crisis counseling, psychoeducation, development of coping skills, and linkage to appropriate resources. Learn how to apply for crisis counseling and assistance training grants by clicking there. Crisis Counseling Assistance and Training Program, the check sheet, a disaster care management program. A disaster care management, a DCM, is a supplemental award made to a state, tribal, or territorial government or non-government organization to assist disaster-impacted individuals and families through the recovery process. DCM involves partnerships between a case manager and a disaster survivor. The intention of this program is to assess and address the survivor's unmet needs through a disaster recovery plan. This disaster recovery plan includes resources, decision-making, priorities, providing guidance and tools to assist disaster survivors. There is a hyperlink to click on for a review of the toolkit. Disaster legal system services, DLSs, provide legal aid to survivors affected by the presidentially declared major disaster. And these services are available to survivors who qualify as low income and are limited to cases that would normally incur legal fees. Typically, the types of legal assistance offered include help with insurance claim, health, property, or life, recovery or reproduction of legal documents lost in the disaster, help with home repairs and disputes with contractors and or landlords, the preparation of powers of attorney and guardianship materials, and FEMA appeals. The DLS is executed in partnership with the American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division. Disaster unemployment assistance provides unemployment benefits and re-employment assistance services to eligible survivors affected by presidentially declared major disasters. These services are the responsibility of the United States Department of Labor and are administered by the affected state, tribal, or territorial workforce agencies or territorial workforce agency. A DUA is only available to disaster survivors who are not otherwise eligible for unemployment insurance through their state, tribal, territorial workforce. A voluntary agency coordination. Voluntary agencies are among the first to provide survivor support services, triple S there folks, post-disaster and continue support effective areas. Throughout the recovery period, the work of these organizations complements federal assistance and may support gaps in coverage. FEMA's voluntary agency coordinators support communities in conducting unmet needs assessments and organizing early coordination efforts, as well as developing and guiding local long-term recovery groups created to assist individuals, families with the recovery processes. And there are some referral lists, and that is the bottom of the list. So we are going to go and look briefly at a very, very long PDF, but I will assure you guys we will not be reading it all. So stay tuned, guys. We are drawing closer and closer to the end of this third installment of 5 Nights at FEMA, part 3 of the FEMA files.
First, we begin with a 6 Investigates follow-up. A widow and Hurricane Harvey victim was about to start anew. She was packed up and ready to move into a FEMA home.
Well, that's when things went south, only to have the agency yank it out from under her at the very last minute. Her name is Tabitha Castro. She lost everything in Harvey, including her home. Countless phone calls later, FEMA finally delivered a 3-bedroom trailer for Castro and her 4 kids, not far from the home they lost. But on Monday, FEMA called again to take the trailer back, telling Castro that she should never have been approved in the first place. The Chief Investigative Reporter Rick Spruill recently spoke with Castro and asked her how it felt to get that call.
FEMA's typical response to situations like these is to remind us that they can't discuss individual cases. They say they do that out of respect for someone's legal and privacy rights. But Tabitha Castro isn't worried about her privacy or her legal rights. She's worried that if she doesn't share her story, then it might happen to someone else.
Something good since Harvey happened, something good was finally happening to me, and then they took it all away from me.
The good thing Tabitha Castro's talking about is this: a brand new FEMA trailer for her and her 4 kids. It's meant to replace the one she and her husband owned, the one Harvey took from her. Tuesday afternoon, she showed us what's left.
No, my porch came out like this. This is what all this wood is.
So when FEMA called to tell her she'd been approved for a home and even gave her the exact location, Castro rushed over with her kids in tow so that they could pick out their new bedrooms.
They made that decision. That was going to be the boys' room.
And then on Monday, this voicemail from Castro's FEMA housing representative.
I got some little bad news I have to deliver to you if you have not already received.
The bad news? Less than 24 hours before Castro was due to get the keys, she says FEMA took them back. Handle it pretty well.
No, I'm dying inside. This is all show. I'm dying inside.
It's important to know that Castro has been getting help from FEMA. She's using the money they gave her to rent a small apartment. But 6 Investigates asked FEMA under what circumstances someone might get approved for a trailer and then denied at the last minute. The FEMA representative we talked to told us they can't discuss Castro's case. Instead, they referred us and Castro and anyone else to their appeals process. Castro says she knows the process. She's already been through it 3 times. This latest setback will be her 4th. And though she's frustrated and tired, she says she won't give up. She can't, if only for her kids.
They want to go home, and they have no home. And it's really hard to deal with.
Rick Spruill, 6 Investigates.
Tough situation to be in. Now, Tabitha Castro says that she will keep us updated on her situation, and we will continue to follow her story.
So here we are at our token government issued PDF that once again comes from FEMA.gov, and this is attachment S, mass care. And this, you do have to sort of enlarge it a bit. And at the bottom there, SLG 101, a guide for all hazard emergency operations planning. It is 12 pages long. We will try to get through a few of them, but probably not all of them, but I will provide you with the ability to read it at your own leisure by stopping and starting the screen. I will scroll to the very bottom. My God, I can't see that for absolute shit. Even as big as it is there, and there isn't the ability to read this in mobile view, so we probably won't be reading that much at all, come to think of it. And had I have thought about the size of the screen before, but let me try and make it as large as I can to read. We might have to do some back and forwarding and this, my apologies. This function deals with the actions that are taken to protect evacuees and other disaster victims from the effects of the disaster. These actions include providing a temporary shelter, food, medical care, clothing, and other essential life support needs to those people that have been displaced from their homes because of a disaster or a disaster threat situation. And this is about developing a mass care annex. So we might only just read the purpose to this because, as I said, it's very small, hard to read, and difficult to navigate. But the mass care annex describes the provisions that have been made to ensure that disaster victims receive the appropriate services when a mass care at a mass care facility. The local government is responsible for the development of a capability to provide mass care services for its citizens in the event of an emergency, and it should be prepared. If necessary, it is to receive and care for people evacuated from a large area directly impacted by disaster. The requirements for service may vary depending upon the the nature and phase of the emergency. Local officials must be ready to provide different types of support in response to unique nature and of the situation. Prior to the onset, facilities, e.g. schools, churches, non-essential government buildings, etc., are needed to register, shelter, feed, protect, and provide for other human needs of an evacuated population. So should a disaster be declared, there's a hurricane on the way, folks, it looks like it is going to be damaging, and then all of those things are then required by law to be registered as mass care facilities and provide the evacuees with physical protection from the aftershocks, radiological contamination from nuclear power plant accident, etc., of a disaster. During the post-disaster period, these facilities, FEMA camps, folks, may be used on a long-term basis to feed, care for, and provide temporary housing to disaster victims whose homes have been severely damaged or destroyed, or they cannot return to their homes because of damage to or debris on the roads and bridges. Other long-term post-disasters mass care options may include kitchens to feed people, a water supply stations, first aid stations, temporary housing in rental units. So you've got to rent the temporary housing, it would seem. There are hotels and motels available. If or not, you have to pay for those. Mobile homes. We did just see a video of a lady who was granted access to a FEMA trailer because she was a victim of a disaster. And then just before she moved in, FEMA said, yeah, you're not so accessible to services. We're going to have to take the trailer back, I'm afraid. So they also should provide rental units, hotels, and mobile homes. There should be hygiene facilities, portable toilets and showers, and they should be able to receive mail. This section should identify the emergency conditions that could occur with and that would require the activation of mass care operations. These considerations are probably long. Attachment F. In turn, to provide input for decisions about types and locations of mass care facilities to be supported. For example, if the community is vulnerable to floods, hurricanes and tornadoes and nuclear power plant accidents, the locations of mass care facilities should be outside of the flood plan and have sufficient structural integrity to provide people physical protection from the effects of high wind, earthquake, aftershocks, and contamination. This section also should address unknowns of the emergency situation that is associated with mass care. Such assumptions focus on the probable operational situations under disaster conditions, cover unanticipated contingencies, and establish the parameters within which the planning for mass care will take place. Typical assumptions are the ultimate responsibility for mass care services for citizens rests with local government. A public, non-profit or private sector organization will manage and staff the jurisdiction's mass care facilities. For large-scale disasters, a DWI system will be implemented. Was a DW1. In most jurisdictions, the ARC will serve as the principal organization responsible for operating mass care facilities during disasters. If ARC services are not available locally, other public or non-profit organizations in the community will assume responsibility for operating mass care facilities, and these organizations may include such agencies as the Salvation Army, churches, schools, or local service agencies. Sufficient warning time will be able to ensure that mass care facilities are opened in time to provide shelter and other services for people that have been evacuated. Remember in part 2, guys, we saw that FEMA were requesting vendors step forward with turnkey facilities to provide mass care in the events of a disaster scenario. And all of this prior to and leading up to Keystone 6, the national level exercise that is going to simulate a disaster of a series of high impacts that will see 100,000 people affected by the disaster that will need to be homed and cared for up to 90 days. But approximately 80% of evacuees will seek shelter with friends or relatives rather than go to established mass care facilities. Smart folks, those 80%. The actual figure should be based on behavioral studies and past experiences of the jurisdiction. So keeping tabs on folks that are reluctant to go to mass care facilities, it would seem to be there. But where available, military support, as approved by the governor, will be available to support mass care operations, and the jurisdiction may have to enter into an agreement with adjacent jurisdictions to arrange for mass care services for evacuees that cannot be taken care of in the home jurisdiction, or to provide similar services to other jurisdictions when evacuees cannot be cared for in their home jurisdiction. And that is where I am going to stop reading it, folks, on page 3 of 12. But let me make it a little bit bigger so you can, as I said, read this at your own leisure, and we will scroll down to the very, very bottom and back up again so that you, as I said, can read this at your own reconnaissance if you choose to do so. Wouldn't have been good if there were 11 pages. We would have had a 9/11 reference there. So there we go, guys. We are at the bottom of the page, and I will scroll back to the top just one more time to get every page in there and make sure you can read everything that is included within this PDF document from FEMA, from the government, about how to set up a mass care annex. Make of it what you will, folks. So one last article, guys, and then we will be wrapping it up, and the dancing girl will be playing this out. So having looked a little bit deeper into exactly what the mass care strategy is, courtesy of our fine friends at FEMA, we are going to wrap things up at masscarestrategy.org, which, guess what, folks, is yet another government website. And we have seen this before, but we are going to wrap up just on a reminder of Keystone 6, the national level exercise about to take place on the 20th of the month of May 2024. That is this month. That is in a little under 3 weeks' time, folks. Watch this space for developments, and allow me to clear my throat. Excuse me, a lot of talking does make RD a dry boy. But mass care service systems, and they sort of erased a little bit of systems, but service size, SS there for you folks. Use of mass care task forces for March 2024, that is gone, but this document provides best practices and relevant guidance procedures, checklists and job ages for use of task forces in mass care. The audience for this document includes federal, state, local, tribal, territorial emergency management agencies, non-government organizations, as well as private sector entities involved in the coordination of mass care services during a disaster. And as I said, guys, is all of this for a disaster that is about to happen? Is this not a training exercise? Is this the cleanup being put in place, ready to assist when the disaster happens, that may very well coincidentally be during, immediately post, or prior to this national level exercise taking place, as was the case in that September of 2001, where FEMA were planning to conduct a bioterrorism attack scenario exercise at Pier 92, the Port Authority, New York City, just across the street from the World Trade Center complex. They arrived on Monday, the 10th of September, to set up for the 12th. Lo and behold, wouldn't you just go and know it, on the Tuesday morning of the 11th, some radicalized hijackers decided to kamikaze pilot some commercial airliners into those two towers, and of course the heat of the jet fuel burning for too long and for too hot did cause complete structural failure to those two towers, where the steel melted under the heat of the jet fuel and they collapsed upon themselves, according to the 9/11 Commission report, the official narrative there. Make of that what you will, folks. But FEMA reforms disaster assistance to help survivors, and this is again very, very interesting, folks. Listen to this part. The Federal Emergency Agency, FEMA, has published an interim final rule amending its regulations governing the Individual Assistance Program to increase equity by simplifying the process, removing barriers to entry, and increasing eligibility for certain types of assistance under the program. So let's just read that again. Removing barriers to entry and increasing eligibility for certain types. Maybe sort of not everybody is eligible for the assistance, but simplifying the process. Removing barriers to entry says that they're trying to make it quicker and easier, because maybe there's going to be a lot of people in the not so distant future needing to access FEMA assistance under the mass care strategy. See what I'm trying to get at, folks? But this assistance applies under the program, and this rule applies to the emergencies and the major disasters declared on or after March the 22nd, 2024. So we are in that period of time now. They've just made an amendment to extend emergencies for natural disasters declared on after 22nd of March 2024. And the final one, moving along, 2024, the National Mass Care Exercise, May 2024. The 2024 National Mass Care Exercise, called Keystone 6, and this is almost the only article talking about Keystone 6, the mass care exercise. I've looked for videos, I've looked for articles. All that comes up is this article or variations of this article from the same website. But it is called Keystone 6, and it will be held in Shippensburg. We know this, guys. I am just repeating this for it to sink in. And it takes place in Pennsylvania on May 21st to the 23rd, 2024. As I keep repeating, just under 3 weeks away at time of recording, at time of viewing. And this scenario will involve large-scale impacts cascading across the region, and it will need for a mass care services for 100,000 plus people. Pennsylvania will be standing up a Commonwealth managed shelter, and it will be activating an operational planning mass care task forces for feeding, sheltering, disability, integration, reunification, all things we've been reading in this stream, guys, household pets, distribution of emergency supplies and housing. Sign up to receive updates and registration information here. Read more about mass care in Pennsylvania at that website, and we have already done that. The National Mass Care Strategy provides a unified approach to the delivery of mass care services by establishing common goals, fostering inclusive collaborative planning, and identifying resource needs to build the national mass care capacity, engaging the whole community, including underserved and vulnerable populations. The National Massacre Strategy focuses on sheltering, feeding, and distribution of emergency supplies. Again, scroll down to the bottom because this is very, very hard to read, and I'm sure this is purposely mad quick stay beforehand. It's like, you know, you have to read it. The first column from top to bottom, the second column top to bottom, the third column top to bottom. But family by Asian, mass, man, mad, and natural. I'm just trying to see if there's any sort of hidden coded messages in any of this, which is why we are scrolling to the bottom. And I know I've done this before in a previous theme, but as I've mentioned, it is for your reminder purposes. And again, this weird format at the bottom, and why they chose to switch to this format midway through this article, one can only wonder. But as I said, we are getting to the bottom. Now, there was another, I did say this was the article, there was another article that was regarding mass care, and it was regarding pets. So when I do get to the bottom of that, I will show you that article, but we won't be reading it all, although I don't believe it is that very long. But pretty much what it is saying is what we've been hearing for humans, but for pets. But it does seem very interesting to me that Fema has gone to the lengths and extremities of providing contingency preparedness plans for pets. What's going on there in this article goes on and on and on. There it is. This is it. I'll save you the article, but this is another one. I think this is actually the link to that article. Perhaps there might be a hyperlink to click on. But the Female National Advisory Council lists subcommittees for 2024, including panel planning for animal wellnesses, working groups starting on April the 2nd of 2024. So again, this is possibly active, and some of these dates have been and gone, guys. Look, 25th of March 2024, 19th of March. So there was some Fema pet related activities going on there. Fema releases a new exercise starter kits, including reunification support, and that was on February 8th of this year. A proposed collection and a comment request for public assistance non-congregate shelter data collection activities, February 8th of this year, again 2024 on the Gregorian, and FEMA reforms disaster assistance to help survivors, February 6th of 2024. There is a map there, although no regionalization, no sectors 1 to 10, and there is the Mass Care Strategy logo. Back to the top, guys. So as I said, I'm not going to bother including that article about pet wellness. I might save that for another stream because I still got 2 more Fema files to make in order to conclude 5 nights at Fema, and it is a quite time-consuming process. This stream, I think, will be running close to the 3-hour mark as it is, and you don't know how many hours it goes in to making a 3-hour stream. So I'm going to just jump out of here and then flip to something else to do the outro pleasantries, and then the dancing girl will end the proceedings for this third installment of Fema Files and the third night of 5 nights at Fema, a Shit Video Productions shitty event, a special event here at NoOneWatchesArDee, part of the relaunch and rebrand celebrations that'll work. So that is it, guys. Let's wrap the proceedings up for this evening's stream. That was the third installment to 5 nights at Fema, and this was part 3 of the Fema files. But all that is left, and the only thing for me to say rather in this stream is until the next time, folks, please take care. May the force be with us all, and more importantly, let's just be excellent to each other. So that's Ardee signing out for now. We'll see you in the next one.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes!
Hey, Luke. May the force be with you.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.